Hello there. September is Sepsis Awareness Month, and it's estimated globally that 50 million people contract sepsis every year with a 25% mortality rate. Well, now an epigenetics company called VolitionRx is aiming to help both doctors and patients, as they're currently undertaking studies to test their new groundbreaking CE-marked technology as a diagnostic aid for sepsis and to monitor disease progression and treatment response. So to find out more about sepsis and Volition's exciting work in this field, watch this short video, which includes a series of clips from a presentation they made recently.
The current definition of sepsis is life-threatening organ dysfunction caused by a dysregulated host immune response to an infection. And I'll come back to that at the end because I think it's a really important thing to bear in mind. So yeah. And the final thing I want to pick up, I clicked on a little bit early, is that yes, I'm an intensive care doctor with a real specialist interest in sepsis. The reason I was recommended to Volition is I'm also a haematologist, and I find hemostasis, the stopping of bleeding, really, really fascinating. I have been accused of being a geek before, but that's probably true. And the cross-link between infection and the hemostatic system is so crucial. And I think what I'm going to try and explain is why I think the new Q test, the H3.1 assay, is so critical to improving our understanding there and is potentially transformative. This slide was actually provided by Professor Djali Anand, a world-renowned expert in sepsis. And one of the points we're trying to make here, there are over 50 million deaths a year from sepsis. There are over 50 million cases, and over 11 million deaths a year from sepsis. Over 40% of deaths in children under 5 are from sepsis. And 50% of survivors are left with long-term sequelae. I chose that term IROT on the previous slide. You can see this poor lady. She's lost both her legs, or she's had below knee amputations. And you can literally see people turn black in front of you. They can deteriorate that quickly. So nets spew out this DNA behind them. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit the microphone. And the nets are decorated with proteins that have a huge range of functions. They attract other immune cells, come here and help. They actually capture bugs. And some bugs are clever enough to manipulate nets to hide in them now as well, which is another marker that they've got to be important. Nets also have something called tissue factor on them, which promotes blood clot formation, which is why you've got a blood clot here too. What we know is that if you get excessive net formation, those nets can break away, be in your circulation and go somewhere distant. So that circles back to this dysregulated host immune response. You get excessive activation of your immune system. And if you have free circulating nets, they can be directly toxic to other tissues. They can damage your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your brain, any organ tissue you want. And they're probably part of the key link of explaining why people progress to multiple organ failure. It's a potential real marker of severity of illness. The other thing is they're associated with blood clots. You can see the clot at the end there with platelets, these tiny little building blocks which are involved in stopping bleeding, and red blood cells all bound together. And they can signal excessive blood clots. And if you have small blood clots forming blood vessels, that can stop oxygen going downstream. So again, you get more organ failure. So there's really intimate link between stopping bleeding, hemostasis, and our immune system, and the basic building blocks of our immune system. And coming back to what Cameron said at the beginning, that's years of research I've just summarised in a very broad brush there. The reason I'm with Volition is that this is a diagnostic test which is easy to run, is broadly applicable. It's not a postdoctorate in a laboratory, in a teaching hospital or a university hospital, studying frozen samples retrospectively. This is a widely available, easily reproducible, easily deliverable test. Intensive care doctors are obsessed with organ failure. That's what intensive care does. It supports organs, be it with ventilators, renal replacement therapy, ECMO, special ventilatory support, cardiac support, etc. And so there are lots of organ failure scores, and they often come on huge checklists. In America, we tend to talk about the Apache 2 score and the Apache 4 score. In Europe, we tend to use the Sequential Organ Failure Assessment score, the SOFA score. And this paper, published by Moremont last year, shows that the NUQ level correlates well with sequential organ failure assessment. Bluntly, the sicker you are, the higher your NUQ level is. So that potentially provides doctors with really useful and powerful information early. You heard Cameron talking about the tests and the turnaround time, potentially within 45 to 60 minutes, perhaps even faster. And that's a really good marker to identify this is a more poorly, this is a sicker patient that you can differentiate your response to. The SOFA score in itself is quite tricky and it's just a little cumbersome, it's slightly bureaucratic, there's lots of bits to check, etc. And so we just generally use it in a research setting more than anything else. One of the things you'll come across and hear repeatedly in our talks is how early diagnosis is so important. I think we're all familiar with the concept that tissue is time. And actually, if you delay giving antibiotics, patients in severe sepsis, a patient's mortality goes up by over 7% every hour. That's a lot. 45% of them with severe sepsis, if they get to ITU, will die. There's huge room for us to potentially improve and change. And I think this test helps us in that process.